Good evening and welcome to Holmdel Township Committee June 27, 2017 meeting. I'd like to call the call session order.
Okay, Mayor Bontempo.
Here.
Mr. Riverdale is absent. Mr. Hines.
Present.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Mr. Nicholas.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mayor Bontempo.
So before I run into the regular scheduled agenda tonight, I asked our, actually the committee asked our COA attorney, Andy Baer, to come in public session, explain what's currently going on in terms of the COA process in affordable housing. So,
I can't hear you. Can you go louder?
So Andy, Baer, you want to,
I'm pretty loud.
you're pretty loud?
Thanks. Yes, thank you.
No, bring it closer.
Right on?
Okay.
You got it.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor and members of the Township Committee. So I just want to, by way of very brief background, the Township of Holmdel, following a Supreme Court decision, New Jersey Supreme Court decision in 2015, which took the powers of the Council of took powers away from the Council of Affordable Housing and required towns such as Holmdel, that was before COA, Council of Affordable Housing, to file declaratory judgment actions in the Superior Court. We did that. I did that on behalf of the township in 2015, and the court case has been proceeding since then. It's really a two-phase matter. The first phase of that litigation is where the court is going to determine what Holmdel's affordable housing obligation is going to be for the period 1999 through 2025. Because COA had failed to adopt constitutional regulations during that, going back in time, going back to 1999, Supreme Court is requiring towns to develop a plan to meet an affordable housing obligation over that 25-year period. And there's been substantial statewide litigation as to not that the township has been directly involved in, but where a municipal position has been asserted as to how the affordable housing obligation should be determined. Those proceedings are still ongoing. A court in Holmdel is part of what was COA Region 4, and that includes Monmouth, Mercer, and Ocean counties. And what a court is, since January, there was a hearing going on in Mercer County where the court was going to determine what the obligation was for Mercer County. But in order to do that, the court will have to determine what the statewide affordable housing need is, and then what the region affordable housing need is, and then what the town-by-town affordable need is. That matter is still ongoing in Mercer County. The trial, at least as presented by the lawyers, has been completed. We're expecting a decision there probably towards the end of the summer, but the Monmouth County proceeding has been put on hold, in essence, pending at least the outcome of that Mercer County proceeding. In the meantime, we have the parties, we have obtained from the Fair Share Housing Center, which is a statewide Fair Share Affordable Housing Advocacy Group, by order of the New Jersey Supreme Court. They are participating in every town's affordable housing matter, including Holmdel, by order of the New Jersey Supreme Court. They have put together an expert reports that have set forth what they believe the affordable housing obligation is for all the different towns in Monmouth County, including Holmdel. And their expert report for Holmdel has the affordable housing obligation at approximately 400 units. There are other towns that are in the vicinity here where the obligation is even higher than that. But the number for Holmdel is at least 400 units. We have engaged in a mediation process, as was ordered by the court with Fair Share Housing Center. We are still in that process now. We had one mediation session, and there has not been a settlement reached as of yet, and those discussions are ongoing. But the plan will be, at least going forward, is that if we're able to reach an agreement with Fair Share Housing Center, we would put that a settlement agreement together for the committee to consider. And as part of that process, the committee would have to identify what site or sites you would want to include in your affordable housing plan to meet that number, what the obligation is. As part of the mediation session, we are negotiating what that obligation will be. As I said, fair share is about it's at 400, but like any litigation, there is discussion as to a reduction in that number. If we reach an agreement, and we have to, as I said, have a settlement agreement that has sites or sites in it, ultimately, that we would have to then present that to the court, have a fairness hearing before the court, where the hearing is advertised to all prospective property owners that have filed objections or filed as interveners in our plan, and the court would consider whether or not the plan that ultimately you would approve meets the township's obligation to provide for its fair share obligation to low and moderate income individuals.
Andy, just so I'm clear, just for the benefit of the public, so no one is confused, that does not necessarily mean that 400 new edifices need to be built. It simply means that we need to satisfy roughly that number, and there are bonuses based on rental versus ownership, based on seniors versus non-rent. You know, I want to make sure that
Yes.
that number is not missed.
Correct, Committeeman. The number is actually 400, at least again, that's Fair Share's position, is 400 credits. And as you pointed out, under the COA regime, you can get bonus credits for rental housing, senior rental housing, assisted living facilities. And so, at least as between myself and the planner, we have recommended, obviously you want to maximize the number of bonus credits you can get, because that will limit the total number of actual new units you'd have to provide for. Now again, the town does not have the obligation to build the units. The town has the obligation to provide for the realistic opportunity that they be developed. So that would ultimately mean inclusion in a housing element, which is part of your master plan, and ultimately potentially zoning to allow for the development. But that's way down the road. But yeah, if the number was 400 hypothetically, that means you could get 80 bonus credits. So that means you would have to provide 300, under that scenario, 320 actual units. But please keep in mind that we are advocating for a far lower number than that.
Andy, if the town didn't do anything, the town didn't submit a plan, any recourse?
Yeah, I think I've, over the years, have explained this, but yes, there are substantial, any municipality, again, this comes from the New Jersey Supreme Court, it's the Mount Laurel Doctrine, goes back to 1975. And towns have wanted or two choices. The one choice is to participate in the process. The other choice is to not participate. If you participate in the process, the town controls where and how the obligation is met in terms of density, in terms of height, in terms of buffer, in terms of all those sorts of things that you and your planning and zoning boards normally do. If you do not participate, you'd be subject to a builder's remedy litigation. And what that means is that a property owner or developer could file suit and say, Holmdel, you haven't met your fair share obligation, and I have a property that I'm willing to provide for affordable housing. And you may, as a committee or a community, not want that property in your affordable housing plan, but if you don't have a plan to meet your obligation, the court can order the township to rezone the property. So it could be zoned commercial. And if they're presented, as long as it's buildable, developable, the court could order residential housing in a commercial zone, and could, at densities that could be as high as 15 to 20 units an acre. And that is why it's called a remedy, a builder's remedy. Holmdel historically has participated in the process. You had received second round certification from COA. Back then you had a 768 unit obligation, which you, with bonus credits, et cetera, that you planned for and met. And since we filed our suit in the Superior Court, I've obtained a court order from the court providing Holmdel immunity from builder's remedy litigation while this process is ongoing. We do have a number of interveners or objectors that are participating in our process. They don't get a say as to where, if you ultimately decide to, or adopt a plan, affordable housing plan, they don't get to choose where it is. They can appear in court and say, I don't like your plan, I think my site is better. But ultimately, as long as a site or sites that you pick are approvable and developable, the court will defer to the municipality's decision in that regard.
Andy, how does Holmdel's obligations compare to surrounding towns?
Well, again, this is according to Fair Share's expert report going back to last year. Howell Township has an obligation of 1,368 units. Wall has an obligation of 2,081. Manalapan, 999. Marlboro, 1,370. Hazlet, 723. So even, and I think it's, well, let me just say that comparatively, Holmdel has done well in that you're significantly lower than that. So even though you have open developable land, the issue is there's not a lot of sewer here. So I think at least on one side. So I think that the number's lower because of that.
Andy, in the years past, Holmdel has been able to take advantage to actually sell off or, push some of it to other towns. Is that option available?
No. Those are called regional contribution agreements. And suburban communities historically, through the second round, had, in essence, paid other communities, more urban usually, for basically $20,000 to $30,000 a unit, and then you'd say, here's 50 units times 20,000, here's $1 million, and then we would get credit for that. In 2008, the legislature adopted what was known as the Roberts Bill, and our regional contribution agreements were declared illegal. So the towns or suburban communities are no longer permitted to, in essence, buy their or sell their obligation to another. As I said, we are in negotiations to try to move this forward. I have nothing formal at this point to present to you this evening, but I just wanted you to know that this is an ongoing process, and I would hope that by the end of the summer I would have something more formal for you to consider in terms of proposals that are manageable to get to, to reach an agreement with Fair Share on the number, and as to the manner by which we would meet that number.
Thanks, Andy. And the next COA obligations coming from Trenton would be when?
Okay, that's a good point, Committeeman. So the Supreme Court, in its 2015 decision, basically said the third round, which is what we're in, the third COA round, goes back retrospectively to 1999 and goes forward through 2025. If we're able to reach an agreement with the Fair Share Housing Center and we get court approval of that agreement, we will get a judgment of repose, is what it's called, from builders. We get court approval of our plan with a judgment of repose from builders remedy litigation through July 1, 2025. It's basically, when the Supreme Court issued its decision, they said it was going to be a 10-year prospective period, 2015 to 2025. So what happens in 2025, who knows? But unless the New Jersey Supreme Court substantially changes the Mount Laurel doctrine, because the court has held it every municipality. This obligation we're speaking of is a constitutional obligation. It's not statutory. It comes from the New Jersey Constitution. It'll be to the extent there's any developable land in any municipality in 2025, they'd probably be looking at a fourth round obligation. Whether any of us are sitting here talking about that then, I don't want to comment on. That would get to an age discussion, but yeah. So, but anyway, yeah. So it probably will go on in the future, but of course, things do change. So you never know.
So Andy, just for my clarification, so if we come up with a plan, it would go through our normal process, approved by township committee, and goes to the planning board for approval, in presentation, discussion, public discussions about what action would go on said property. The alternative you said was we don't do anything, build a remedy. The judge then dictates, and it would still come through planning board, or?
Wow. In essence, the court would order you to rezone the property for what the developer was looking to do, to make it a variance-free application. So if the court orders a builder's remedy of 15 to 20 units an acre, whatever that proposal ultimately would be, the court in essence would order the committee to rezone the property. The developer would have a concept plan or and more than a concept plan, have a site plan that would be presented to the court, and ultimately would come back here, and so the developer would have a variance-free application before the planning board.
Andy, one other question. The number how it gets determined in each town,
Yes.
it has zero bearing on past development, correct?
That is true.
Because one of the websites that was floating around Holmdel made I thought it was a silly point that because of certain, developments, our number was X. But I wanted to clarify for the public, that's got nothing to do with that.
No, historically, Committeeman, that was what COA tried to do between 2004 and 2013, roughly, was implement a concept known as gross share. So if you approved a development, then there would be affordable housing obligation and that arose out of that. The New Jersey Supreme Court declared that methodology unconstitutional. So the fair share obligation is not determined by that. It's actually, there was a 41-day trial in Mercer County over this. It's a very complex process going into how low and moderate income households are formed in New Jersey, how long they last, whether they go away, don't go away. But it has nothing to do with what projects that have been approved. So yeah, that would be a false rumor.
Andy, can you just go over what the levels of income would be that the affordable housing participants would be able to participate in?
Yeah, and again, the term has always been, I work in a number of suburban communities really throughout the state, and there is this, I would say, fear that in essence, in the suburban communities, that COA housing or affordable housing is what I'll call Section 8 housing, and that's where very poor people get basically vouchers from the government to live in housing, and they pay the landlord their rent to live in housing. That's not what this regime is. This regime is really workforce housing, and it's for teachers, young police officers, that kind of thing. And the income range for a moderate, again, it depends on how big the household is in terms of people, because it ranges from like they have charts where it ranges from one person to an 8-person family. But for the sake of discussion, if you have a 2-person household in Monmouth County, and they have a moderate income, the income range goes from $60,000 per household for 2 people to $80,000 for 5 people. If it's a low income unit, it goes from $35,000 to $50,000 for the same household. So people who, and it's actually since the financial crisis in 2008, it's actually become, this especially for for-sale housing, very difficult to get individuals qualified, because these individuals have to qualify for a mortgage. So you need this house, you need this income, and you need the ability to pay the monthly mortgage, you know, that's associated with it. So if the housing goes for, you know, $100,000, $120,000, you need the ability to pay that mortgage with the income of $60,000 to $80,000. So there are people that need to prove they're employed, who are, you know, there's a substantial, the entities that do the qualifications go through a pretty substantial process to qualify people. And then they have to qualify typically with a bank to get a mortgage. So it's a very rigorous process.
Anybody else from Township Committee?
Thank you.
Andy, thank you. John, anything?
No.
And thank you for coming, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So on consent agenda, first order of business consideration approval items, consent agenda listed at 7A to 7M, excluding 7G.
Correct, we're going to pull item G, as that doesn't require approval this evening.
Okay. Any items any of the township committee members need to be considered separately? Seeing none, motion? Second, roll call please.
Mr. Nicholas?
Yes.
Mr. Hine?
Yes.
Mr. Cutelli?
Yes.
Mayor Bontempo?
Yes. Thank you. Now proceed to our adoption of ordinances. Maureen, would you please introduce ordinance for final adoption?
An ordinance amending Chapter 7, Traffic, Article 7-20, Crosswalk of the revised general ordinances of the Township of Holmdel, Monmouth County, New Jersey, ordinance 2017-10. This ordinance has been published in the Asbury Park Press, posted on the bulletin board, and copies have been made available to the public through the clerk's office and at the rear door.
Thank you, Maureen. Mike, could you please provide an overview of this ordinance?
Sure, Mayor, this is an ordinance that corresponds with Holmdel Park, simply moving a crosswalk as requested by the Monmouth County Park System on Robertson.
Perfect. Do I have a motion? Any public comment? Seeing none, close public portion. Second, Mike, roll call?
Mr. Nicholas?
Yes.
Mr. Hine?
Yes.
Mr. Cutelli?
Yes.
Mayor Bontempo?
Yes. We'll now proceed to item 9 on the agenda. I'll accept the motion to approve the 7 licenses listed on the agenda for approval, as well as denial of the license renewal to JAG as listed on the agenda. Roll call?
Mr. Nicholas?
Yes.
Mr. Hine? Mr. Cutelli?
Yes.
Mayor Bontempo?
Yes. Next is approval of minutes from the May 23rd, 2017, and June 13th, 2017 meetings.
Motion. Very good.
Thank you.
Roll call?
Mr. Nicholas?
Yes.
Mr. Hine? Mr. Cutelli? Mayor Bontempo?
I recuse from June 13th. Department reports. No. I'm disappearing on me. I looked down for a second, she's gone. From the Township Committee, Committeeman Nicholas? Committeeman Hines?
No.
Committeeman Rutella? Okay, anything from our CFO?
Not tonight.
Okay. Anything from professionals? Robert?
One quick item, starting tomorrow, we're going to rehabilitate the section of Crawford's Corner Road between Long Street Road and just past South Holland Road. So there'll be prep work tomorrow. It's going to be a day where traffic will be alternating. And then Thursday night, starting at 6 o'clock and through the night until 6 o'clock in the morning, that section of road will be paved.
So will you be able to come from South Holland and make a right and go to the high school? The only reason I ask is that
Tomorrow.
there's camps going on for kids at the high school. I just want to understand for traffic
Yeah,
patterns.
during the day, Wednesday, yes. Yes. During the night, between 6 and 6 p.m. and 6 a.m., you will not.
But during the normal workout, you know, from 7 a.m. till 3 p.m., there should be traffic, normal traffic flow. If I want to make a right on South Holland, come to the high school.
Yes, it will not be normal. There will be some delays because there will be alternating traffic directed by the police department. but you will have access. This is being done now because we waited till the school was finished, otherwise it would have been very, very difficult.
Makes sense.
Thank you. Anything else?
That's it.
Don, anything, any updates for you?
No, Mayor, thank you.
Seeing no more, open up to, oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, we have two resolutions. They're mayoral appointments. Be it resolved that Mercurio Leo being hereby is appointed to the Holmdel Environmental Commission as a full-time member to fill the unexpired term of Mario Zolofra, which is scheduled to expire on December 31st, 2019. I'm sorry, Mauricio. Right. Be it further resolved that this environmental committee position will be the liaison to the Holmdel Township Planning Board. No motion is necessary, it's a mayoral appointment. And the second one is, be it resolved that Lou Lopristi be and hereby is appointed to fill the unexpired term of Thomas Carano as a member of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Said appointment is scheduled to expire on December 31st, 2019.
Thank you, Maureen. Anything else, Mr. Attorney?
No updates from me. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, seeing none from attorney, I'd like to open the floor for public comment. Please bear in mind that pursuant to Resolution 2017-27, approved this year's reorganization, individuals will be recognized one time. Well, for comments up to 3 minutes in duration. When recognized, please proceed to the microphone, say your full name, address for the recording before comment. Any public comments? Come on up.
Good evening. I'm Anthony Cooper. I live at 8 Orchard Avenue here in Holmdel. And first of all, I have a question relating to what Andy Bear was talking about before. I know that the last formally approved low-income house or affordable housing plan that Holmdel had was approved, I believe, in December of 2008. It had about 4 elements. 3 have been completed. 1 has not been completed. The one that has not been completed is to allow about 60 rental units on Block 57, Lot 2. Just behind the Perna Dance Sweet Shop, dry cleaners, and I think a pizza parlor there. What is the status of that particular lot?
Is that Middle Road?
Yeah, that's
It's on
Middle
Middle
Road.
Road.
Yeah, so the
It's
status,
actually-
this,
It has frontage on both, I believe,
yeah.
Laurel
Yes.
Avenue
Yeah,
and
so the developer that owns that still has not provided a plan that is in accordance with the CAFR regulations. So we can't develop that piece of property because the plan that the developer has presented is not in compliance with CAFR.
You said from CAFRA, you said?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's in the CAFRA area?
Yes.
And it has more strict
Yes.
regulations? Is it feasible?
Can you just, maybe Tony, if you could let go of the microphone?
Let go.
It's gonna shock you.
No, Donna, could you let go of yours?
I
It was Donna, it wasn't you, Tony.
Perhaps Mr. Broberg could offer an opinion as to whether or not it's feasible to work the CAFRA regulations for that particular lot?
That is not clear. It's up to CAFRA and DEP.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's conceivable that could still be in the pot of offering.
Yes.
All right, thank you. The second question that I asked is that I know that on the large former Bell Labs tract, we have quite a bit of development going on there. I recall that from some of the earlier discussions as to how to carve that thing up, there were some large parcels of land for a sports complex which have not been spoken to. So there is some land somewhere on that, somewhere roughly 400 acres, that could conceivably meet part of the township's affordable housing obligation. Any comments on that?
Greg, if I can comment?
Good.
It would require us to change the redevelopment plan, because the current redevelopment plan allows for, I think it's 150,000 square feet of an activity zone. So we would have to change it. Right now, the current plan does not allow any sort of density housing, any more housing than what's already being done by toll. So it would require us to change the redevelopment plan. So no, none of that acreage would be eligible to satisfy our current code plan.
Would it be possible to, with a negotiation with the court, to make that happen there?
Yeah, so,
Let me ask one more question.
Okay.
If you said no, your answer to that was no. At one time, there was a discussion, several rounds of discussion, what the development, those roughly 400-acre tract at one time would be to meet the township's COA or affordable housing obligation. And there were some numbers tossed around which had some fairly large numbers. And it seems to have fallen off the chart of consideration. The convalescent center with its beds, that seems to be gone. So what is being done to help the township's affordable housing situation with contributions from this tract of originally somewhat over 400 acres?
Okay, if I could just comment, Mr. Cooper. The township is currently looking at all the possibilities in order to meet the COA obligations if the township pursues a settlement. And the COA attorney, Mr. Bagger, was here earlier to provide kind of an overview of the process and to provide the public some insight into what the township committee is currently considering to the extent he can discuss it in public. Obviously, with respect to specific sites and those types of considerations, as well as the negotiations with fair share housing, those are items that are the subject of current litigation, and so they really can't be discussed publicly. The township committee can certainly receive your comments and appreciate your comments, but they may not be able to respond directly to some of your questions with respect to specific sites. So I just want to put that out there for yourself and for anyone else who might be commenting tonight.
Well, thank you for that. From what I hear you say, Mr. Collins, nothing is off the table as far as extracting some contribution from the former Bell Labs tract to help Holmdel meet at least part of its affordable housing obligation going forward.
What I'll say is the township's considering all options, whether or not that's an option or not, I'm not commenting. That would, be a legal opinion that I'm not offering here, and the governing body certainly is.
Thank you. Let me just offer a comment. I know that the township, from my perspective, has appeared to be more than generous to the developer of the main Bell Labs building, the Bell Works, and also to the developer of the Toll Brothers condominiums, and also the Toll Brothers standalone, 40 standalone houses. We've even given them a pilot for the housing, which is a very generous contribution to them. So considering that, it would seem to me that the citizens of Holmdel would have every right to expect that the Toll Brothers organization, the ones who build the houses, would be in a position to make some reasonable and significant contribution to Holmdel's affordable housing contribution going forward, and bearing in mind that there's land on that tract which has been earmarked for recreational purposes, as Committeeman Hines has pointed out earlier. And so the resources seem to be there, and it's just up to the Little Township Committee to hold the developer's feet to the fire. That's my comment. Thank you.
I would note the developer in that instance does have an affordable housing obligation. It's a question of where it would be located, but there is an affordable obligation that came along with the approvals associated with this.
Now, the question is he going to be able to push that out of his tract and up and elsewhere in town, or is he going to be able to develop it on tract? One time, I noticed some of those core obligations may have changed, but the obligation seemed to imply that the developer tracks a certain affordable housing obligation on a particular tract. He's got to meet it on that tract.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay? So that's my view. Thank you.
Anybody else? Come on up.
Barbara Singer, 43 Azimuth Court. We started out with the 400 units, which Mr. Hines, you clarified are not 400 new units, and it came down to 320. I wasn't sure, is that 320 new units then? Or what was that number?
Who said 320? Did I say 320?
No.
Oh, Andy said.
Yeah, Andy said it.
I don't know how he used that.
I think he said there are bonus credits
Right,
that
there
are
were
involved.
yes,
Yeah.
so with that, it would have the number reduced. But again, we're just talking conceptually, because we really don't have a number yet from Fair Share. So it might be 400, it might be 500, it might be 300.
Right,
So-
so when he brought it down, was the 320 still referencing new units?
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah, so we have other options that we can do as far as the controls and things like that. So we won't know until we know the number for fair share exactly how many new units, so to speak, we might need.
Somebody could have had a 20-year lease, Bob, and that lease is a part of the COA plan. If they renew that lease, then that unit is then eligible, so that's one. It's not a new unit, that unit is now, it's not entering the free market, it is still part of the COA obligation. So in theory, you could have 50 condos, 50 townhouses, 50 homes that were part of the COA, and if they re-up their lease, then we're able to use that towards that number. So obviously,
It remains in the
I think
called
our
an
goal
extension.
as a committee is to satisfy as much low-hanging fruit to reduce, nobody wants to see sprawl or any aspect. We're trying to satisfy our obligation without impacting any neighborhood.
Right. As far as who is intervening in the proceeding, is that information we can get on who those parties are without me having to go to the courthouse?
Louder,
Is
Barbara,
it- Is
louder.
it on our website anywhere, or how?
No.
It's probably in the Superior Court
Yeah.
file.
Yeah, I know, I'm trying to avoid that.
There's three developers.
Just two developers?
But, yeah, it's litigation, I'm not gonna get into it.
No, I know, but
You can
who
certainly
the
check the
parties
docket.
are on public record.
Mhm.
Okay. So, we're talking about like when these developers make a contribution into a fund, do we have a certain, how much is in our fund? What would those funds be used for? What's the plan? With that money?
I don't know, they're just here today.
We have about $3 million in our COA fund right now, and that money can be used to offset development. So the developer might come in, and in order to make it financially feasible, because they may need money from our COA fund to build the unit. So we would give them a contribution from the COA fund.
Do we maintain a list of properties we've been considering over the years that might
Louder,
be-
Barbara.
Do we maintain a list of properties we've, from over the years that we consider for this housing?
So in our previous COA plan, there's sites that are written in there. We haven't developed any plan yet because we don't know our number.
So that could change.
That will change. So the sites that were in the 2008 plan might still be there, or we might have new ones depending upon what our number is.
Then my last statement is just a comment. I've read the Mount Laurel opinion, and a lot of that opinion is based on the public policy of not clustering low-income housing people together. Because in a societal level, there were negative repercussions from doing that. So I would just like everyone to bear in mind, because I have heard from a first responder in Holmdel that when they get calls for low-income housing, it's generally to the developments where that housing is clustered together, as opposed to Palmer Square, where I've been for the last 3 years, and it's mixed in with all the housing, and it seems to have fewer problems that way. Most of the people who live there don't know who even the low-income housing residents are. The kids don't know. So in part of, when we are developing a plan for the whole town, I would just ask that that public policy be kept in mind for the betterment of the whole town. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else, public comment? Yeah.
Carol Bonner, 96 Middletown Road, Holmdel. I have a few questions, and I'm disappointed. I'm glad the gentleman was here. Andy, I didn't get his last name.
There, like you asked me.
Okay. I'm glad he was here, but unfortunately, I really think the public really wanted to ask him some questions. So perhaps if the Township Committee can't answer public's questions, they will publish them someplace or respond as far as how the units are decided, how many units we need, et cetera, what are the factors involved. I mean, years ago, when I was on the committee, you had infrastructure, which was a factor for Mount Laurel. You had sewers, which you mentioned tonight, okay? You also had environmental resources, which areas of parcels of land that you could not develop. which I think we also came out in the Palmer Square issue, you can't build Mount Laurel on wetlands, okay? So those things are very important. Has the committee put together an ERI, an environmental resource inventory, on the lands that are actually available without sewers, with sewers rather, that are not environmentally constrained? Yes.
So, yeah, so about a year ago, we, in anticipation of the mediation, prepared a lot of those documents that were provided to Fair Share that were considered when we had our first mediation. So all that information has been made available to them.
Okay, and that would be a factor to, as far as minusing maybe our obligations for those
Absolutely.
properties,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so as far, again, going back to when I was involved with the committee, it was transportation corridors, sewers, public water, employment, population, et cetera, were all factors that went into, and to the best of your knowledge, there's still gonna be factors?
Yes.
Carol, the one issue, if I may, if you
Yes.
look at the sheer numbers, that you're talking about throughout the state, hundreds of thousands. So I think as far as what the impact that the communities, you heard the numbers, 2,000 in Wall, 1,000 in Howe.
Right.
So I think that although, proximity to mass transportation was once a significant issue.
Right.
It is now, I think, not gonna be as significant. The concern with the sewers is that although certain areas are not sewered, what my greatest fear is that, they can attach, because most of the towns are within a few miles of another sewer. So there's tremendous liability on the town to look at all areas, because just because it's not sewer today, it doesn't mean we couldn't connect. Especially if we got hit with the builder's gun machine.
There's a lot of friction on your mic. I don't know if it's how close you're speaking or whatever. So in other words, you're saying they can force us to install sewers for this?
No.
No, that's what I understood you to say. Is that correct?
I worry about it.
You worry that they can force us?
I worry about it.
Okay, all right,
I worry about it. We can have a settlement.
okay. The other thing I was curious about is we have satisfied our obligations, and can you give me the numbers on how many units we've satisfied so far? Was it 320 we satisfied? I missed that.
We haven't presented a plan yet for the third round. So once we know what our number is, so let's say our number is 400 or 320, the committee will have to come up with a plan to accommodate those units. Now, that's not all new units, as we spoke about earlier, might be an extension of controls or other things. But we don't know what that number is yet.
Okay, because when I was looking it up online, in 2010, there were some numbers as far as how many units we've already established as Mount Laurel units or COA units. Can you tell me how many that is? That was in 2010.
I don't know.
700 and change.
I'm sorry?
Around there.
700 and change.
700 and change. So this would be 400 on top of the 700, is that correct?
This is new.
Yes, so we don't get credit for that 700. In other words, it wouldn't be through.
I think what Committeeman said before was, there are potential options to extend the deed, if the deed's expiring from a prior round, so that this is not why I wanted Andy here, this is not a cut dry, 400 units, you have to build 400 units, there's so many different implications in this.
Okay, that brings up another question. Thank you for
You're
that,
running
Mayor.
out.
I appreciate that.
You got less than 30
By the way,
seconds.
congratulations on your primary.
Thank you.
Okay. Years ago, we had certain builders that were actually buying the Mount Laurel units and putting them into rental units. And I believe they expired after 30 years. Now, maybe Ed was around during that time, maybe he can help me with that. I know Donna wasn't. But maybe